What is up, guys? We are back with another episode of the Building a Buzz podcast. This week's a really interesting episode. We have Cameron Kennedy, the CEO and co-founder of Legion Sports. They do fantasy football, but I think there's some really interesting gems about working with family members, growing a business, some hurdles that you have to go through, being the head of an organization, accountability, a lot of really cool, interesting things that we got to talk about on this podcast episode. You guys didn't know, we also have a visual version of this on YouTube. So if you're hearing this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, somewhere online, please make sure to go over to YouTube, type in Building a Buzz podcast. You'll find this episode. You can always watch it if you would like to watch it rather than just listen. But for now, let's get into the episode. This week, I have on Cameron Kennedy from Legion Sports. Quick rundown about Legion. They are an app that helps you determine who to start or sit each week in fantasy football. Football season is already here, which is kind of crazy. This year has flown by. So now's the time to check out what they can do. Cameron Kennedy is the CEO and co-founder of Legion. He's here to help us give a better idea of how he's building a buzz in the sports industry. So thank you, Cameron, for joining us today. How is your day going?
It's going great. It's going better now that I'm here with you having this conversation. Hey, thank you for the introduction there. And thanks for having me on.
Give me a little bit of background about yourself. Where are you from? Where are you tuning in from right now? That kind of thing. And what's your history?
So a little bit about myself, kind of a nomad growing up, right? I spent the first 15 years of my life in Massachusetts, and that's why I moved down to Florida, of course, and finished out my high school career, attended UCF, go Knights, and graduated with a degree in finance. And ever since then, I've been working in industry as an advisor. That's in addition to what we have going on now at Legion Sports.
Cool. So you're doing advising in the finance industry now as well?
Yeah, I've been acclimated to the stock market at a really young age. I started around 17, 18 years old, so I've been following it ever since then. It was just a really easy transition to actually learning more about it at UCF and becoming employed in that industry. It's cool. The market's just as crazy as everything else right now too. So
yeah, I was about to say it's an interesting time to be in anything finance related. I feel like, crypto, finance, stock market, everything is just kind of crazy.
Don't even get me started on crypto. That's a whole different rabbit hole that would take hours to go down.
Yeah, right. So give me the journey post-college. Like, have you been just working for one company since college? Like, what's the journey been between when you graduated and what you're doing now?
Yeah, I've been with one company, basically just consulting / advising, a really client-centric role where I'm there to understand what my clients' needs are, learn more about them and why they're investing their money. Because, of course, with the markets, there is a level of risk that these clients are assuming. So it's really up to me to be that problem solver and generate value to provide to that client to earn their business. So really that role itself, and including my studies at UCF, have really molded me into a problem seeker. And by trying to solve those problems, that's how we earn the business. So
cool. That's awesome. I like that. Problem seeker.
Yeah.
Instead of problem solver, like fix the problem before it becomes a problem.
There's always something there, or at least something you can improve on. Sometimes a little bit harder to find than others. But if you're able to do so, then there are rewards and you can gain some really great relationships off of it.
It's a great point. So talk to me about how you started Legion Sports. When did you start it, and kind of how did that idea come up, and what was that process like?
Oh man, that actually takes me back all the way to 2015. So I've been playing fantasy football for about a decade and a half now. It's been a religion for me. Every single time that we draft, we just had our draft day a few days ago, and we treat it like a holiday, right? And I remember there was a time where I had a really thick conundrum as to who to start in my lineup. Right, I couldn't figure out on two specific running backs who should I play, and if I lost that week, then I'm kicked out. I'm not making the playoffs. But if I won, then I'm locked in and we're good to go. I was going through the internet, looking at all the mainstream sites like ESPN, CBS, Fox, all of those guys that people are familiar with now. Wasn't satisfied, so I went on social media. I went on Instagram, Facebook, Reddit. Was posting my questions. didn't get the answers I was looking for, nor did I know that they were genuine. So I started asking my friends, and still being unsatisfied with that, the thought came in my head. I was like, what if I could ask potentially thousands of other people just like me for their genuine advice to help me with my starter sit matchup questions? I was so motivated by this aspect back then. I drew something in Microsoft Paint. And Justin, trust me, I am not the most creative person ever. I'm
Yeah.
like
Well, in
literally the
Paint, you
exact
can't
opposite.
really. Yeah, Paint doesn't give you the tools to be creative either.
I'd love to show you. I think you'd get a good kick out of it. But that kind of sat at the pit of my stomach for quite some time, really, because, I mean, we all get it. You know how life is. Hectic. I was like 26, 27, 28 at the time. A lot going on. Family, friends, significant others. Just, it's really tough to find the time to really commit yourself to something like that until COVID happened. We had all this spare time. It got me thinking. About a couple days into it, I was like, wow, we're probably going to be locked down for a while. We're not going to have the opportunity to go out and live our normal lives. What am I going to do? Well, it dawned on me. I was like, I could sit my butt on a couch and watch Netflix and waste the time away and wait for life to become normal again.
Yeah.
Or I could really pursue my passion, which is this idea I came up with years back. When I came to that thought, I reached out to my cousin. And my cousin's my right-hand man, consider him more like my brother. He is the complete opposite as me. What I do, of course, is really like people-facing. I like to talk. I like to represent brands, just like what I do now with Legion.
Yep.
He's all things technology. And I kind of floated the idea by him, and he absolutely loved it. Yeah, we started then, and this is where we are now.
I feel like a lot of people were one of the two extremes during COVID. They either watched the whole season or whole series of Game of Thrones like me, or they went out and created something, you know, like you and like a lot of other people. And
Yep.
so it's interesting that was kind of the catalyst or the reason why you actually moved on that thought that you had years before.
It was funny that you bring that up too, because kind of like a motivating factor that I had was I was talking to friends, family, colleagues, like what they're doing during COVID, and they were saying, oh, did you catch Tiger King? I was like, no, I have this project that I'm working on now, and that kind of encouraged us to dive even more into it.
Geez, you're making me feel better because I watched Tiger King during COVID too.
I eventually did.
There we go. Okay, good. Okay, good.
And
That's funny.
It was a good one too. So
Yeah, it was. So the idea came up, you know, years before you actually did something about it. When you first actually started moving on that idea, did you build out a business plan? Did you just kind of brainstorm with your cousin? Like, what got it from just the idea stage to actually like, okay, we're starting to have something like an actual product here, an actual app? Like, what was that process like between those two stages?
Well, to answer your question, all of the above, right? Because both of us were complete greenhorns when it came to it. We don't have any experience in entrepreneurship. We didn't go to college to study it. So YouTube became our best friend, right?
YouTube University.
Exactly. Yeah. We had some great teachers on there, but we'll just scour through videos just all night long, just figuring out what does it take to really start a project like this? What's needed financially, what's needed from a time commitment level, from an emotional standpoint, all these different variables that we had to research to prepare ourselves in order to begin this journey. But yeah, once we were able to gain that information, I mean, we really just hit the ground running because we had a vision, we had a goal, and we had a team between him and I. Even when life became back to normal, I mean, we'd just spend late nights up drinking way too much coffee, making sure that we got our things done. Because at the end of the day, working on something like this was really a pleasure for us. You know, it was a privilege to be able to devote time to a project over something that we're so passionate about.
So how long and what was that process like between just when you guys were doing the research and when it actually, you know, first came out to be a product?
Well, it was longer than what we initially hoped for, right? Because we began in early 2020, right? And we wanted to launch for the 2020 NFL season, which began in September, right? Yep. So we had, 5 months or something like that to get everything together and launch the platform for that season. Because as you know, the NFL season goes on for 6 months, maybe, including playoffs. So we really only have like a specific time that we can strike and launch our platform. We spent almost every weekday after work devoting some kind of time into it, whether if it's hours until 4 o'clock in the morning or even if we just have a tough day, just throw, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour into it just so we can make some kind of progression. This was really our first hurdle. We weren't ready in time to launch for the NFL season. And there's a number of different variables that came into play in there, but at the end of the day, we just couldn't do it. And then it got pushed to maybe we can do a mid-season launch so we get some kind of traction. And that didn't work out either. And it seemed like a continuous, a compounding effect, you know, where it was just kind of, there were more and more hurdles that we had to jump. But thankfully, my cousin and I were able to fight through it. So 2021 was the first season that we launched. So it was about a year and a half until we actually like started working on it that we could launch this product. So
okay, nice. And so as you guys are finally getting it, you know, launched in 2021, what was the lead into launch like? Like, how did you guys promote this thing? How did you get the word out about it? What was the lead into the actual release of Legion?
Yeah, so backtracking a little bit, going into that, design was one of the hurdles that we had to overcome. So, conveniently enough, my sister is actually a graphic design major from UCF, the one that you're acquainted with that introduced us. I have to say, her work is nothing short of incredible. She's done everything from UI on the app, the website, all of our social media content. She's been able to produce at an extraordinarily high level. We are so blessed to have someone like that on the team. So once she became a part of Legion, she was helping out big time with all the content that we're pushing on the internet, right? We're going on Google, releasing ads. Social media was a huge pillar that we're trying to conquer going into it, because really, Justin, we live in an interesting time where you can click a button and have access to potentially thousands of other people out there that have similar interests. We found that for our first season to be the real mainstream of marketing that we'll be focusing on, which brings us to another hurdle. I know we're talking about kind of things that can be tough when starting a business, right?
Oh, yeah.
Deception can be a big one, right? So we had a marketing team that we ended up hiring that we're going to rely heavily on, that was saying all the right things that we wanted to hear and that we wanted to portray as a company, that never really came to fruition. I'll tell you, experiencing something like that, of course, isn't just a financial strain, especially on a company that's bootstrapping, basically implementing the ramen noodle diet. But it's emotional and time consuming too, because it really hurt us the whole season not having that marketing team help us get to where we wanted to be. So back to being greenhorns, being newer at it, of course, we just gave it all that we had, just trying to build relationships with people online and different message boards, different platforms, different content strategies, all these separate campaigns that we're firing off, just trying our best to get the word out there. This year, we're taking a little bit more of a holistic approach, and hopefully it'll pay off for us. So.
You know, I always find, like, talking to people that have created their own businesses, there's people have this general conception that, like, oh, cool, he started a business. It must have been not too hard for him to do or her to do. But then when you really get down into it, there's so many things that go wrong along the way that don't happen like that you wanted them to. You know, there's so many things that you can run into when you're starting a business. So, like, that's why I think it's super important to create a business plan and to do all that brainstorming and research and stuff like you said you did. You know, it's like, without that, you don't have kind of a clear direction on where you want to go. And even with that, you still run into so many different things that you don't expect, you know. But at least with some sort of plan and a lot of research, you can try to avoid those things as best as you possibly can. But they're going to happen no matter what. Like, there's no avoiding some of these things. It's crazy.
No, absolutely. I could not agree with you more. And really, marketing can be one of the hardest pillars when it comes to creating a business to conquer. I mean, you could have the greatest platform or product in the world, but if you can't distribute the message and the brand properly, I mean, you're going to be stuck in the mud. I mean, I'll give you an example. Last year, I'd go to NFL tailgates to represent Legion and kind of rub shoulder marketing, right? Where you kind of, hey, you like fantasy football, you're at this NFL event. And this actually happened several times where I'd be with this individual for about a half an hour to an hour, and I'd be explaining all these different things to them, and they look really, really interested and invested in the conversation, until I find out that they're too inebriated to remember the name of the platform that we're talking about. You know?
Right.
So those are kind of things that you just have to laugh at, trying to kind of just get back up on your horse and just keep on plugging away.
Let people know it's legionsports.io is the website, but is the app the place that people should go to download and check out, or should they go to the website first? Like, where should people start on that journey if they're interested in fantasy football, they're interested in communicating with other people about, who to sit and who to pick for the week? Like, where should they start when it comes to Legion Sports?
I'd say with the app, it's free to download on iOS and Google Play. However, the website, it's a fantastic resource to really understand what Legion Sports is all about. There is a tutorial in the app to kind of help you guide you through the process. But if you use both of those in companion, I think you'll be able to have an understanding as to what makes Legion Sports different and why it could be a valuable asset for your fantasy team, right?
Inside the app, you guys have this mascot. And the mascot is a goat, which is perfect because, it goes along with the greatest of all time theme that's always brought up in sports specifically. And so tell people a little bit about like the goat, what it represents for you guys, for the company, and how you utilize that like within the app. Because I feel like that's a fun thing that is enticing for people to like come and try to become the goat of the week.
Yeah, so for everyone listening here, growing up in Massachusetts and being a Patriots fan when they were 13, I was able to witness the rise of Tom Brady. So, of course, everyone calls him the GOAT, and it's thrown around pretty easily nowadays. However, myself, I'd like to really embrace it, right? So, in the app, there's a leaderboard for people that answer matchup questions. They'll be ranked, and depending who's number one, there's only one person that would be labeled as the GOAT. Right, so that is the person that knows what they're talking about when it comes to fantasy football. When they speak and give you advice, you listen, right? So our marketing campaign, we're really focusing on that, a goat. So we have a goat head, a mask that we put on, and we're there to really just give the advice, help you with any kind of guidance that you need when it comes to fantasy, and make it entertaining too. And to be quite honest, a little secret, it's easier to create content when you have a persona like that. Because multiple people can be the GOAT, right? It doesn't have to be one person, one face, or one voice. It's really anyone that knows fantasy football enough to help others.
That's cool. And it kind of goes with the theme of sports, like having a mascot. It's like, the GOAT is a perfect representation of what you guys are trying to do in the app. So I feel like that's just a really cool kind of thing. And like, if you become the GOAT, you're going to show that off to other people. You're going to want to tell people about it, which then makes other people want to be involved, right? Like the big FOMO that's going on around things right now is like people want to be involved with cool things that are happening. So if someone's the GOAT, they're going to want to show that off as best as they can. If you get to GOAT status, how do you lose that status? Is it because you're making wrong picks every week? Like, how do you gain and lose that status? And like, how often do you guys kind of update who the GOAT is like within the app?
Weekly. So okay. It's a weekly process, right? So, of course, we're competitively crowdsourcing fantasy football advice. We have 2 users that we classify for internal terms, kind of segment like how we're catering to them. Mm-hmm. First would be challengers. The second would be legionnaires, right? So challengers are the ones that need advice, and legionnaires are the ones that are willing to give the advice. A challenger would create a question, it'd go into a randomized bucket, and would be presented to the legionnaires to answer. It's really clean cut, super easy. It's which player do you think will perform better during this week's games, right? To answer your question, whenever these legionnaires answer the question, say we'll get an accuracy rating, and depending on that accuracy rating, they'll be placed into a certain percentile on the leaderboard. Depending on how many people are on that leaderboard, if you have the highest accuracy rating, then you'll be number 1. And it's not just on an individual week basis, it's an accumulation of the accuracy ratings that you get from every week that you answer, right?
Cool.
Now, it's not going to come easy. There are certain requirements that you have to pass in order to be eligible for the leaderboard. You have to answer a minimum number of questions, and you have to make sure not to miss any weeks, or the questions will compound, and you'll have to answer more.
That's awesome. I feel like it's such a fun way to involve people in it, right? Like it gets them to do more things, to engage with the community more, to engage within the app more, and like it's so smart. I love that that part of it. I feel like that's something that people are gonna fight for, like they're really gonna want that status every week there. I saw that you guys are doing like some partnerships as well. Can you give me some more information about some of the recent partnerships that you guys have, or how do you go about like getting a partnership, and what do those help you guys with?
So the most recent partnership is with Rotoballer. Rotoballer is one of those dominant fantasy football advice companies, and what they're providing to us is updated news across the league or for individual players. So that was one of the big requests from our user base last year, was that they wanted some kind of news source within the app. So a really cool feature that we implemented was that if there's any kind of breaking news that comes out, there'll be a push notification on your phone alerting you that this just happened, right? Say, for example, Damian Jones is a real big sleeper for this year's season. When Damian Jones was named the starter, my pocket was buzzing. Legion Sports, Damian Jones is a starter. Make sure to grab him in your draft. Boom, I'm drafting cool. Tonight. Thank you.
That's really cool. And same with injuries too, right? Like you don't want to be stuck with the guy that tore his ACL and didn't know about it.
Yeah, unfortunately, you'll get those grim notifications like that, hoping that no big players this year get hurt. But I mean, these guys are modern day gladiators, so it's going to happen.
Yeah. And so with the partnership conversation, like where do you see this going? Like could you get some, larger partnerships with like, let's call it ESPN or like Sports Center, or like what do you guys foresee the coming future looking like, especially when it comes to fantasy sports? I feel like there's a big emphasis on betting nowadays. Like there's, so much online talk about sports betting and gambling and all these different things. So like, where do you guys kind of see the future of fantasy football going?
Oh, man, you nailed it on the head. Huge industry, right? It's a $30 billion industry. It has a compound annual growth rate of like 8%, which is ridiculous, especially the betting aspect. As betting becomes more and more legal across the states, that just opens up an even bigger opportunity. So with the partnerships, how we're going to try to capitalize on that is we have connections that we are so close to finalizing our deals with, where they basically have access to anybody under the sun when it comes to NFL. We're talking about rising, upcoming players, current household names, all-pro players, retired players, Hall of Fame players, really anybody. But what the real difficult part of that is how are you, if you get in front of a player like Tom Brady, how would you present value to him enough to the point where he's willing to help be a brand ambassador or strengthen Legion Sports?
Yeah. Because I mean, you're talking millions of dollars if you try to do it monetarily. And so you've got to come up with some interesting ways to make it enticing. And, I think that's it's really interesting to think about like what you would do in that scenario. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially in a position like us, bootstrapping this, not having any kind of funding, trying to retain all the equity that we can, which we have been. You really have to implement abstract thinking, like what's important to them. Kind of like what I was talking about earlier with finance, being that problem seeker. Like, is there a certain charity that they want to support? Some kind of perpetual agreement, some kind of cause that we can help. Especially someone with the status as Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, all these guys. They basically have everything already. So how can you come in and present value to earn their trust and their support?
Yeah, that's really cool. And I recently have an interested NFL player in becoming a franchisee of mine. So maybe we'll have to talk offline about that, because I think, maybe that could be a good connection for you guys too. Yeah, so that's crazy. Like I feel like it's cool to watch. I think we talked maybe like a year and a half ago or something like that, just briefly about like some marketing stuff, and it's cool to kind of see where it's at now and where you guys are headed, because I feel like it is a big industry that's just growing, and like the betting side of things is gonna take this to a place that you maybe didn't even know that it could go to, which is exciting, especially I'm sure for you being at the head of it. How do you kind of navigate your daily responsibilities as the head of the organization? Like, how do you set out your your daily responsibilities, how do you schedule out what you should be doing? How do you kind of plan that out? Because I find like being the head of Get Up and Go Kayaking, for me, like every day seems to be a little bit different than the last day, but I think that's what makes it exciting for me. So I'm kind of curious, like how you go about that, and what tips and tricks do you have for scheduling your days out to get the most important things done?
Yeah, organization's key, right? Especially when you're saying that you're at the top of a company like Legion, you have to make sure that you need to follow up on every priority that you've had in place, any kind of lead that needs to be tackled, because if you don't do it, it's not going to get done, right? So, I mean, you should see my calendar. It's just jam-packed, thick, tight with all these different little tasks and everything. And of course, you do really have to prioritize things in certain times of the day. So like 9 to 5, I know with my employment, have to take care of that. If I don't take care of it, then there really is no future with Legion, right?
Yep.
Afterwards, dedicate maybe, I don't know, I'd say take an hour to like reprieve, just relax, unwind. Don't work yourself into the bone, because it is really easy to get overwhelmed sometimes, especially when you have so many responsibilities at hand. And then when you're ready, just go ahead and tackle it. So yeah, I just try to schedule as much as I can. I mean, really the best advice I can give you, Justin, and everyone that's listening, is organization. You really have to be organized, because if you're not, things will fall through the cracks, and then it will make it twice as hard than what it originally would be. So
Yeah. No, definitely. I agree. Having some sort of structure to the madness is definitely helpful. Working with other people gets difficult because sometimes things fall through the cracks, and at the end of the day, you're in charge of the company and you kind of have to take accountability for a lot of those things. So have you ran into that much with your guys' company? Like, I know whenever, like, for example, Get Up and Go Kayaking gets a 1-star review, I'm just like, man, this is my fault. I didn't train my employee well enough, or my tour guide well enough, or something like that. Like, how do you view the accountability when it comes to, being the CEO of the company?
Well, I'll tell you, that's a really great example you just brought up with having a bad review from especially someone that you work so hard to appease. And the review that we got, this individual put, I have no idea what this app does.
That's the whole review?
That was a whole review, 1 star.
Man.
And at first I was pretty pissed about it. I was like,
Yeah.
what do you mean you don't know? You haven't gone to the website, blah, 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 this and that. You don't know anything about fan. But then I took a step back, deep breath. And I was like, you know what? There's no welcome page when they get into the app. There's no pop-up tutorial or anything. Really, I took accountability on myself. Got my cousin on the phone. Was like, hey, we really need to rectify this. Got it out within the next couple of days, and we haven't had a review like that since.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like there's many moments like that, where you're like, oh man, maybe, at first you're like, what the hell did I do wrong? But then you kind of put yourself in the customer's shoes and realize there was maybe a little bit more that you could have done, or something you could have done differently, and then it helps kind of solve that issue or that pain point for future guests. So, I always feel for the guests, and there's a lot of times in my industry specifically where I see other companies responding negatively to their 1-star reviews, and it just hurts everything. Like, instead of doing that, just take the time, take the accountability to thank them for their time to leave this review, and see what you can do differently and change whatever that pain point is, because 9 times out of 10, it's something that you could probably do better or do differently or fix for the next person. So I think it's cool that you learned from it and implemented a change that probably wasn't too hard for you guys to do, like make a welcome page and just a tutorial of how to use things, but is probably now helping, tens or hundreds or thousands of other people, which is really cool, all because of a 1-sentence 1-star review. It's crazy how that kind of line of things works, especially when you're the head of the company and you're the one seeing those reviews and responding to them and that kind of thing. It's an interesting thing when you're kind of in charge.
Yeah, and like those little small things, as tiny as a 1-star review, like if you're able to find opportunities in like that to improve your brand, the product, company, or even yourself, you need to take full advantage of it, because over time it really does add up.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me, now that the 2022 football season's here, what kind of has been the strategy the last month or two in getting into the season? I saw that on Instagram. You guys are doing like a lot of reels. You're doing a lot of reposting about different things in the football industry that are going on, right? Like I saw a fight happen the other day at one of the training camps or something like that.
Oof,
And
yeah.
so what's that strategy like kind of going into the season that's hopefully bringing in more users to the app?
Yeah, so when it comes to social media, Instagram in particular, we try to do entertainment, news, and guidance, right? Entertainment would be like that fight post, something like memes or big hits or something
Yep.
like that, right? Just anything that a general NFL fan would like. When it comes to news, of course, it's pretty straightforward, right? So and so retired, so and so got traded, etc. Guidance is something we're trying to sink a lot of time into, because even though, look, I'm no fantasy expert, I don't have a crystal ball, but I'll give you my genuine and honest advice, and I know others that will too. So we
Yep.
try to accumulate this data, portray it to an audience, and hopefully earn their trust enough where we can gain one more follower, right? Now, the algorithm, that's a completely different story. If there's any way that we could figure out what exactly the algorithm's looking for, I'm all about it. But at the end of the day, you can only control a certain amount of things. And when you do, matter of time, you should be able to find success.
Yeah. Yeah, I find myself talking about social media a lot with a lot of different people, and the one thing that keeps coming up in most of these conversations is that I have a baseball reference. The person that has the most hits ever in baseball also has the most at bats ever in baseball. So it's the same with social media. Like a lot of people are hesitant to post often and post a lot, but that's how you're going to get more views, more users, more followers, et cetera, is just by giving yourself more at bats. Like, there's no tricking the algorithm. There's no getting in front of it. The only thing that you can do is just give yourself the opportunity to get more at bats. And I just think it's an interesting similarity, between baseball. The person that has the most at bats has the most hits. Like it's the same with social media. The more that you post, the more that you give yourself that opportunity to be in front of people, the more likely it is that you're gonna be in front of people. And so I just find that comes up a lot in conversations. So that's cool, and I'm glad that you guys are like posting different things and not just trying to give people advice all the time, right? Because you'd be catering to a smaller market than the people that are just interested in football in general or interested in the news of football, what's going on. So I feel like it's cool that you guys have a strategy that like shows multiple aspects of what's going on right now in the NFL. Is that something that like, do you see this going into different fantasy sports? Are you guys only going to focus on fantasy football? Like, are you going to kind of let the future dictate itself when it comes to that? Like, what's your outlook on different fantasy sports? Because I know there's, fantasy soccer, there's fantasy baseball. Like, what is your kind of outlook on that?
To answer your question, absolutely. Would love to branch off to other sports. Football, no brainer, by far the most popular and the biggest of all of the major sports. But once we get to the point where we can expand, yeah, without a doubt, would love to go to basketball, baseball, hockey, or even esports. I mean, that's really up and coming. These kids nowadays are getting
Yep.
full ride scholarships at colleges for playing video games. Um,
I love it.
but yeah, those are all markets I would love to target when the time is right. And
Yeah.
we still have quite a ways until we get there, but hopefully that becomes a reality one day.
Yeah. And I feel like it's smart that you guys named the company Legion Sports and not like Legion Football. It leaves it much more open ended for you guys to do those things. And I think that's something that a lot of people overlook is like the name of their company and how that could potentially limit them. How did you guys come up with Legion Sports? Is it something that you just had in your head? Did you think about it one day? Like, where did that come from?
Oh man, funny enough, that was like one of the hardest things when we first started. It was like, what the hell are we going to name this company, right? So Legion Sports, when we first said it, it sounded right. And the reason why it did was because we're a numbers app, right? The more people in the app voting, the stronger the data becomes.
Mm.
Kind of like a legion, right? If you have a legion army, you have more warriors or whatever, more people in that legion, the stronger it is. That's a direct correlation into what we're trying to accomplish.
That's cool. Yeah, it's always interesting hearing where people heard about their names or came about their names. Sometimes people just Google things and come across things, and but no, it definitely fits. And like I said, it's cool that it's open ended enough to to be able to expand and branch off and try different things and see what works and what doesn't work. One of the other questions I had for you is, what is it like working with family members? Because a couple of my franchisees are family members of mine, so we have that in common, that we're working with family members. And I'm curious what your take is on it. Like, how has that experience been for you, and how do you guys kind of separate business from family?
So going into it, I've heard the horror stories. Trust me, I have.
Me too.
And that is the last thing that I want for a project or a company like this, to really divide how close and tight knit my family is. However, I couldn't dream of it being any better than what it is now. I mean, talking back to my cousin, like I said, he's more so my brother, my right-hand man. Like, I trust him with anything. His skill set is so polarizingly different than what I have to offer, where we just complement each other so well, right? I mean, the best way I can sum it up is that I'd rather have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich rather than a peanut butter and peanut butter sandwich, right? So, I mean, it's worked out really well. And again, Caitlin, like,
Yeah.
she's done phenomenal, and I'm just absolutely blessed to have these two in my corner. Again, someone that I can genuinely trust no matter what, and that present these amazing skill sets. So with me, I lucked out big time. Like, I couldn't ask for a better situation having these guys and girl on my team. So
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think you hit it on the head there. Like, trust is the biggest part of that whole situation, right? Like, if you're not sure if you trust them before you go into it, or you're kind of indifferent about your family members working with you, it may not work out. But if you fully trust each other and understand that you have each other's best interest always ahead of anything else, then you're never going to come across much of an issue. If you're lacking that trust in that foundation starting out, that's when you might get a little hairy. You got to be kind of careful going into that. So I think you hit it on the head there, and it's great. Like, I think it's so cool when you can bring your family in on something. It doesn't even need to be business. Like, if you can all find a common ground about anything nowadays, it's great. And especially when it's your family, you're finding a common ground, you're being able to work together, you're being able to solve problems together and do these fun things. Like, the memories you can create from that alone are so worth just doing the business. Like, even if the business doesn't work for me, I'm like, man, I've made so many cool memories with my families over the past 6 years. Like, I'm sure it's probably similar to you, where you just feel accomplished in that sense. Like, you've had some really great times with your family, and it's really cool that you guys like work together from the beginning of this through now. It's like, it's really interesting to see that it worked, and to know that it's still working and you guys are still happy with where it's at. That's really cool.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, really, time is the most valuable commodity that there is, right? And as long as I get to do something that I'm passionate about, and being productive with my family members, I mean, it's really a privilege.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's something I couldn't be more appreciative of. So
That's awesome. So before we wrap up here, tell me what the future of Legion Sports looks like. What does this year look like? What is the 2022-2023 football season look like for you guys? And then what is, like, a 2 to 5 year goal of yours? Like, is there a metric that you guys are searching for or wanting to reach? Is there some certain goal that you have in mind? What does the next foreseeable future kind of look like?
yeah, we've hit the ground running as of yesterday. We had some improvements in there. I already discussed one with the news. We have a new UI design coming out within the next week or so. We're really excited to release that. We had the commercial that we launched too. I was so proud of that. We did such a great job. And then we're going to be releasing a show to complement the app here pretty soon.
That's awesome.
This week, we're going to be recording our first show. And it's a lot like College Game Day. And of course, you and I are familiar because they came to UCF a couple years ago.
Yep.
But
The one and only time.
Were you there in that game, by the way?
No, I wasn't. But yeah, it was a huge thing. I remember.
Yeah, it was. There were so many people there, and made me proud of my university
Yep.
showing out like that. At the end of every college game day show, the panelists always debate on what they think the outcome of that day's games will be. Right, so it'll be like, oh,
Yep.
Arkansas versus Wisconsin, who's going to win? Yada yada. What I've done is I've been able to accumulate a roster of fantasy football analysts, right, small content creators that I'm bringing onto the show to debate trending matchups that are identified in the app.
Really
So
cool.
say I don't know, Nick Chubb versus Joe Mixon. Who should I start this week in my daily league? I'm gonna have these guys just go at it full force. It's going to be a competitive environment. So you'll have these guys kind of competing against each other, and then I'm going to save everything, every kind of pick that they have. So one week an analyst does really poorly, we'll make sure to let him know the following week that he needs to pick up his performance.
Yeah. Yeah, and they don't want to be that person, right? Like they don't want to get called out about a negative performance. So I think that's really cool. And I mean, that's what makes like fantasy football so much fun, is the competitive aspect of it. And if you can bring that into a show environment and into your socials and all of that stuff, that's awesome. Like I feel like that's going to work super well. Is this something that's going to be like live that you guys are doing like on your Instagram, or like where's the show going to be? How could people see it? Give me a little bit more of the details of that.
So we're going to be cutting up little segments of the show, and we're just going to blast it out everywhere, right? You'll see it on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, what have you, Google Ads, sure. We had another partnership form just a couple weeks ago. It's pretty recent, with a company called the Fantasy Football Network. And basically what they are, they're a conglomerate of small fantasy football content creators, right? So the best way I can describe their platform is that if Twitch and YouTube had a fantasy football baby,
Cool.
that'd be it, right? The full shows will be airing on the platform, along with other shows too, of course, from other content creators. But that's the plan right now. So we'll see how that works. If it's not getting the kind of traction that we're looking for, maybe we'll have to reevaluate. But going into this season, that's what we're going to execute. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so glad that like you guys are willing to try different things. So many people just do what they do and don't try new things, and they feel like they're in their comfort bubble and they don't want to try different things. So I'm glad that like you guys are trying this out. You don't know if it's going to work. You don't know if it's not going to work. But either way, you're going to try it out and see what happens. And like, to me, it sounds like a really cool idea. It gets you guys a lot of content, and it gets a lot of people involved with it, which maybe already have some of their own fans as well that can funnel back into you guys. So I feel like it's really smart, and I think it's cool that you're kind of like taking some elements from different things, like College Game Day. You're taking some from like Twitch environment. You're taking like a bunch of different ideas and making it your own. And it sounds to me like a really cool, fun idea to like watch and be a part of. So looking forward to seeing how that kind of turns out and what the feedback is on that, because it sounds like a great idea. So that should be really exciting to watch. Beyond that,
Yeah.
Where can people find you guys? Like what's the best place for them to go? Is it straight to Instagram, straight to the website, straight to the app? Like just give me all of it. Where's the best places to find you guys online?
Well, I mean, the best place would just be go into your address bar and typing in legionsports.io, which is our landing page, right? But that's not the most accessible or visible towards the public. I will say that we've devoted the most time in our Instagram page, coming up with the 3 pillars of content and campaigns that we're discussing earlier. Or just do a Google search, Legion Sports, right? We should come right up. If I could direct anyone to Legion Sports, I'd definitely say the landing page, because you'll get a description of the app, how we are truly a first to market fantasy football crowdsourcing app, right? And there's download links in there too. So
cool. Perfect. And I feel like, you said it, you've got to hold people accountable in these shows. Like the next week, you're going to call them out if they didn't do good. So I got to ask, who's going to be like the number 1 fantasy football player of 2022?
Oh man, so I'm actually the host of the show, all right? I'm not going to be an analyst.
Smart man.
Yeah, I don't know. For all those fantasy football nerds out there, I'm sure I'll get some hate or maybe some love. I just have a gut feeling about Alvin Kamara coming back. I mean, you're able to get him at a discount this year. He's going to be in a much improved offense, hopefully a stable one with the new wide receiver core and Jameis Winston playing surprisingly better in New Orleans than what he did in Tampa. But I drafted him in my personal league. I got him earlier than most, but I think there's a good amount of opportunity there, so we'll see.
That's awesome. What about your number one pick this year? Who'd you take first?
It was Kamara. I took him at 7.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Anyone you're super excited to watch this year, like whether they're on your fantasy football roster or not?
Tom Brady, man. Most likely going to be his
GOAT.
last year, but the GOAT.
The actual
and,
GOAT.
We'll never see it. Yeah, we'll never see another athlete accomplish as many things as he's done, So, I mean, we have to cherish it. Some people hate him now. They'll learn to appreciate it when he's gone.
Mm-hmm.
But it's looking like it might be his last year. So I'm going to try to soak it in as much as possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you, man. I think this was great. Like I feel really excited about being able to show the audience, what Legion Sports is and what you guys have in store. Any final words about the company or your journey or the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say this was a really constructive conversation. What I'd like to say to the viewers out there is that if you have something that you're passionate about, whether if it's like art, music, sports, or building tables, as long as you put some kind of continuous effort into it, over time, it's going to grow. And whatever that platform is, people will gravitate towards it because they'll know how much emotion you have invested into it. So there's a saying that I abide by, and it's if you don't shoot, you're not going to score. With Legion Sports, we're certainly taking our best shot, and I hope that other people out there will take their shot too.
Man, that was beautiful. We got a clap.